No director has better exploited this hybrid condition than Alfred Hitchcock did in Rear Window. Alfred Hitchcock said of Rear Window that it was a purely cinematic film, but one could also argue that it is a purely architectural expression of a cinematic idea. He sought to create a design mediation by demobilizing the protagonist and locking the viewer's perspective to his single vantage point, and then presenting all the film's action within the facade of the adjacent building. Rear Window challenges cinematic tropes by presenting a rich montage within the mise-en-scène, segmenting the action of different players but presenting them all at once. Hitchcock creates new connections across seemingly unconnected actions for both the viewer and the protagonist. By drastically reducing the realm of experience and then articulating every moment of it, Hitchcock creates a hermetic experiential space that contains disparate data but still seems coherent. Rear Window's climax comes when Jeff Jeffries gets caught looking, when the rear window gets reflected. The critical eye becomes a spectator to itself, and then it is as though the spell is broken. Jeffries suddenly comes into the world with an awareness of his own fragility. He sees himself seeing. He achieves a state of apperception.
Turn out the light, he's seen him.
It is no shock that Rem Koolhaas, the man who argued for a culture of congestion in delirious New York, would find delight and opportunity in Benjamin's observations on the necessary fragmentation of modern understanding. There is surprisingly little difference between one activity and the other. I think the art of the scriptwriter is to conceive sequences of episodes which build suspense in a chain of events. The largest part of my work is montage, spatial montage. In the work of Rem Koolhaas, the apparatus is the eye, the mechanism is physical circulation. Adjacencies are made explicit through the action of crossing them. The montage Koolhaas speaks of is the cutting of circulation and program against and within each other. This can be understood as a cross-cut architecture, or parallel montage, where the architecture is presenting simultaneity in an attempt to define the richer whole. The intercutting of parallel action in film shows action across space, but in time. Koolhaas uses novel programming to create similar effects in built space. The architecture aggressively edits the experience of the user through the selective fragmentation of program. The Seattle Public Library manages to manipulate time and space through a multimodal segmentation of vision. You are always on foot while inside the library, yet manage to witness the space at many velocities and from a wide variety of perspectives. The higher elevated entrance provides immediate access to a wide interior landscape that functions as a master shot for the space. One believes themselves to understand the entirety of the structure as they look around. It is complex but manageable. This understanding creates a sense of calm and invites further exploration. The building is a mediator of experience. From the moment you embrace its complexity, you also surrender to its logic. Your vision and body begin to interplay with others. Keeping in mind the dynamic montage as mise-en-scène in Rear Window and the circulatory cutting of the Seattle Public Library, I designed an interior space that I thought might capture these qualities. Although interesting, clearly missing was a strategy to create apperception, a way to manipulate time towards the end of self-reflexivity. Montage uses a disjunctive conception of time to create the shock of criticality. Cinemathequetonics seeks the same effect in space. The disorientation and dislocation of the red passage in the guts of the Seattle Public Library comes close to this, but one must leave architecture to find the most capable practitioner of this kind of thinking. Enter Oliver Eliasson.
The danger with entertainment is, of course, detaching time and referring to space as if it's a picture. And I think, quality of good entertainment is, of course, implementation of time into a kind of a sequential sort of type of experience. So this means that if I succeed, should I say, adding the duration of the experience into the experience, and not as a kind of a secondary trail that people have to kind of conceptually think about, then it's successful, and then entertainment or the kind of excitement or the pleasure can carry out consequences. We can take in our surroundings, but we can, as we do that, also be critical about how we do it.
Benjamin saw cinema and architecture sharing the same liminal space between the optic and the haptic, both lending themselves to a passive reception. But the work of Eliasson suggests a break where the shock effect of watching becomes the shock effect of living, the designing of time through the passage of space to illuminate being. Eliasson states that space, without time, is a picture. When architecture attempts to be nothing more but an overwhelming mise-en-scène, a very big picture, it loses criticality, and the essential time-based haptic quality that can facilitate its individuated transcendence into a first-person dialectic.
Thank you for watching A Symphony of Lights, produced by the Tourism Commission. See you next time.
And so, we return to Walter Benjamin and the city, the complex urban condition that demanded a cinematic intervention to become visible. This research of the Cinemathequetonics brings a new understanding of spatial montage within the mise-en-scène of life. The Cinemathequetonics can begin to deploy the isolated disjunction of montage as a strategic method, so that the city can finally see itself from within, apperception through fragmentation. The task which faced the human apparatus of perception at the turning points of history cannot be solved by optical means, that is by contemplation alone. Architecture is not an atemporal picture, but it is deactivated by habitual use. The work of Eliasson and Koolhaas, seen through the lens of Eisenstein, argues for an activated criticality in and with time, where the image becomes a secondary index to a design mediation. Cinematic montage allows the viewer to become at once closer and more detached. At its best, it facilitates a passive criticality. Cinemathequetonics can take this criticality a step further by splicing the self into the scene. The site of immediate reality has become an orchid in the land of technology.